Eric. Thanks so much for jumping on to Attribution Time. I'm stoked that you're here. Eric and I met back in the Atlassian days. Big news with Atlassian lately. But so pumped to have you on. Eric's kind of jumped off and done his own agency work now. And so we're just going to dive into it. Who are you working with? What are y'all doing with Attribution? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ian. We've had it's been quite a journey, switching from the Atlassian type of work that you and I were working on, really like big data sets, big enterprise, long sales cycles, a lot of sales people involved, to I left that about a year and a half ago, and I started my own agency. It's really just myself, and I've been working with mostly, I'd say, like seed to Series B startups, typically playing that role of interim head of demand gen, or
Nice.
fractional kind of like ops and demand gen together. I think of demand gen and operations like so closely integrated, because if I'm helping somebody run an advertising campaign, or even like email marketing campaign, or any sort of advertising, it would be useful to know what happens after you acquire that person, and like, where is that tracked, where, how do I attribute that came from that source, and really help them like understand their life cycle stages and all that. So
Absolutely.
I love doing that. And it's been really nice to kind of get back into the weeds and get my hands dirty again, and like really build up the foundation for all these companies to get that straight. So yeah, that's kind of about the size I've been working with. Not too big. Usually there's a couple of marketers, or they had somebody that was initially running like Marketo or HubSpot, but maybe that person's left, or they need some extra support. So that's kind of
as it shifts with these smaller orgs, and as that happens more commonly, as people move around and things happen, you're able to jump in and kind of be the Swiss Army knife. Love that.
Yeah, I think that's a benefit. Unique skill set I think I have is the horizontal breadth that I bring. Is like, I started in digital advertising at an agency, so like I have like this top of funnel, like paid agency, paid ads experience, but then throughout my career I've been going like further and further into the marketing operations and automations and lifecycle roles. So I don't know, something about marketing automation just keeps me going that way.
Well, I think it just shows like that's the conversation where I was talking with Mike that runs marketing ops, and this was part of the discussion, is that we're seeing the future for us people who live in ops. We believe the future of CMOs, or these higher level marketers, are going to be coming from the ops org, in part to kind of what you're saying. They're involved in all these different processes, right? I mean, so as the MOPS concept continues to grow and develop, they're a part of the entire journey of marketing, and they also reach into sales. And so because they have so much engagement across all of these, because they have to orchestrate how all this communicates, it's just natural that you're going to be in communication with them.
It's such a natural, I think, progression for me as a marketer, and I think you'll see more and more of that. Those rising up, because like, what are the first questions that you get when any head of marketing or head of revenue is going to ask, like, what are our growth levers? What's working? What's not working? If we had to double down on the channel, where should we go? What's our conversion rates like? How good are we at taking this cohort of people or companies and actually converting them into revenue? Like, these are all questions that I think ops people will naturally be able to answer, and they also will be able to help the organization answer, because they know how to set up that plumbing and that infrastructure to be able to answer that. So like, I don't see how you could be an effective marketer without being able to answer some of those questions. Like, if you just know how to like run really good ads, and know bidding, and know ad copy really well, and you know how to drive people to get a conversion, that's really good skill set. But like, what happens after that? What happens after they get,
how do you drive the funnel? How do you
into your database? What is that a useful conversation, and how do you tie it together? So that's where I kind of started to go, and what I've been setting up.
Very cool. And so you're with Series C, Series B. So people really looking for growth, driving that forward, which is always very exciting. It's an exciting time to be a part of an organization. So you're doing a lot within that. This is attribution time. So I'm clearly going to ask you about what are these companies doing to measure success? How are they tracking that? Is this something that's valuable? Like, I think that's even a valid question. If you're Series B and Series C, is marketing attribution even something to invest in, or can you do it with what you have? Like, what are you seeing there?
I think like the word attribution and that gets a little bit messier in like the early stages. I think what they really want to know is like a common question is just like, I'm investing in, let's say, a Google display or LinkedIn or paid social. I don't know how it's performing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Like, or I need an attribution model to tell me how marketing is driving pipeline. Yeah. It's like, well, I don't know. That's part of it, but I think what you actually need is like the initial infrastructure and like the pipes and the plumbing. And I think that the most important thing at that stage is just to make sure that they have a lead source, a latest lead source. Like, are they actually tracking each touch point? And my favorite go to market like touch point tracking is just adding them to Salesforce campaigns. That's kind of like the formula that I think works. It stamps somebody's engagement and it's going to live there forever. It's not going to get overridden. So for me, it's like introducing the touch point concept and introducing how to capture UTMs and all of that. And then you can show your attribution in a variety of ways. And also, I think that attribution can be used in both like, how did this campaign, generate pipeline and how many opportunities came out of it, to like holistically, what are the series or the variety of touch points and tactics that we're doing? Like, what's the most effective combination of those that is leading to successful, outcomes? But I don't think that they're at the point where at a larger company like at Atlassian, I think sometimes people use attribution to show justification of budgets, justification of like contribution. And it's like, you can get into some, really robust models. I know like we used to use Visible. We've tried to use, full circle. We've used internal models.
Try to create it internally.
I think we try to create it internally. And that's more what that's doing is that, like, it's spitting out revenue dollars, associated with all these different touch points or campaigns or broader high level categories of channels. But like, that's more justification. I feel like people are using that. I don't know how they're using that to be like, I mean, I guess you are using it to infiltrate your strategy, but if it's like something that's high level, sometimes I wonder if it's not really answering the question. I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's the challenge with marketing attribution, right? Is that a department will purchase an attribution tool, and so that they can prove their value, which just creates a silo, which is really true. Marketing attribution is silo-less, if that's a word, right? You break those barriers down so that you can understand, okay, with new business, this is the entire process. With existing business and renewals, this is the process. And it's not just marketing, but it is how sales involved. What are their activities? What are those engagements? What is the dark social, and how do we get that data and start pulling that in? It's all the things. But to your point, like that you see that often with larger organizations, because everyone is bidding for a dollar from the executive level. And so they're like, we're going to buy this tool so we can get more money to do what we want to do. And that's the exact opposite of what these tools are trying to accomplish. And that's challenging.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a natural progression, because like if before you even buy your tools, before you even get into it, like if you just have conversations at a leadership level of like with sales and marketing leaders and just talk through like hypothetical touch points, hypothetical situations of customer journeys, like, can they agree on like, what is the common goal? The common goal is to figure out how marketing touch points and sales touch points work together to drive, efficient revenue and efficient new customer growth. But ultimately what sometimes happens, it's like, well, the chief revenue officer just wants to know, is it sales driven or is it marketing driven, or is it should I hire more salespeople or should I invest in more marketing?
Yeah.
And it's not that simple, but I think they're trying to hope that attribution models tell them it in a simple way so that they can use it like that.
Agreed. Yeah.
And I hope that doesn't happen. Like, I know that's not the point of them, but I think sometimes they're used that way, and especially I think at more larger, complex organizations.
Well, the beauty is that anyone who hires you from a Series B, Series C, they got you to help kind of paint a roadmap. I think that part of that, the causation of that is when you're in the early stages of growth, that is exactly what you're doing, right? And that just continues and progresses as you get bigger and bigger, and then you end up with that, where if you can come in and say, okay, this is how we need to look at attributing revenue. And yeah, we're not going to go out and buy a tool, but we're going to use a marketing automation platform to capture lead source and understand where these UTMs are being, what UTMs are driving engagement on our site. And here you have your CRM that's looking at sales data, and how do we collaborate across this using a funnel of sorts, right? That's early stage. That's how you go about that, right? It's very Lego-esque, right? You're putting the pieces together to build what you need. But that's, if you can keep the mindset at a little bit higher level, seeing across different business units, then that helps.
Exactly. Like even from the very first deal that you get, first like opportunity that's created at a startup, like that's when the conversation starts. Like it's the companies at the larger, they might have like hundreds, maybe thousands of pipeline or deals that are created, but at the beginning, it's like, yeah, can you work with the founders and work with the heads of marketing and sales leadership to actually develop that system and that foundation? So like a really common example is like I love account-based marketing lists. So like let's say there's a list of 2,000 companies, or let's say a list of 500 companies you're trying to go after. You'll see the sales team will put them into like sequences or outreach or whatever that motion is of outbound. We'll be targeting them with a LinkedIn account-based model. And you'll start to see like sometimes they won't open any of your outbound emails, but you've technically had a touch point of sending them emails.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden they come in through like a LinkedIn lead gen form, and you can show the history of like what that looked like, or you're warming them up, they're seeing the ads, but they're responding to the outbound. Like that's more, I think more like sometimes I wonder, and I would love your take on this, of like the differences of attribution modeling to answer questions versus actually just doing like A/B testing. Like, like sometimes what you're trying to answer is, if I didn't do this tactic, or is this tactic better than another tactic? If I put them together, if I run LinkedIn and an outbound, does that have a higher like response rate than just like running outbound? And that's to answer that question, I think is different than setting up an attribution model, because an attribution model would be like, well, this gets some level of pipeline credit, and this gets some level of pipeline credit. So like, I think separating sometimes those into two different conversations is helpful for startups and for companies.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a few thoughts on that, but we'll stay in the lane of kind of that startup mode. What happens, no matter what size of organization you are, there's a lot of data. We live in a world where there's a lot of data. 10 years ago, you had, let's say, a Marketo, and that was a ton of data, right? That was like more than enough. You're like, this is crazy. I can't believe we have all this data, like that's being captured through this system. We're at a point where like we've multiplied the amount of data in a very short period of time. And I think that's what's so hard for startups. It's hard for enterprise, but it's even more hard for startups because you don't have the personnel. Right. I mean, so that's why you end up doing that, where you say, okay, we have our sales motion and we're using outreach, and here's all these data. We have our Marketo instance or HubSpot or whatever, whatever it is. And we have all this data here. And really you need someone who can come in and aggregate that and help you understand that and group that. I do agree with you. I think one of the biggest challenges for any organization, but even at the smaller scale with attribution modeling, it's taking 100% of something and then breaking it out. So the max of something in which you can have is only 100%. So even if you take the dollar amount out, I don't care how big it is, you have 100 to work with. right? And that then gets distributed, and that can end up diluting a good amount of information, which is hard. And I think that's where media mix modeling is probably really fun for people, because you're now aggregating data and you're saying, here's what we're finding as to be what's useful, or what's really driving things, because we're able to aggregate this data and kind of group it over here. But even then, it's an aggregation, which is still hard. And so what I'm trying to get at is there's not a perfect approach to it. And everyone knows that. But I think the challenge with marketing attribution is when people go into the mindset of, like, to what you just said, this is going to help me answer XYZ information. And the reality is it could take a long time to be able to answer that. Or when you're especially new or young, your buying cycle is just going to be all over the map, right? Because it's just going to be different every single time. You're still trying to figure out your ICPs. You're still trying to figure out, what aspect of your product, what offering is most valuable to the people you're talking to. You're going to scrape some of those things and add new things. Like, it is going to be all over the map. And so it's really hard. And so at that point, what I would encourage younger organizations is to understand, where to just invest more dollars, right? And that's where you can, it's not, you're going to have to figure out your product. That's going to take time. You're going to have to figure out your ICP. You're going to have to figure out all those things. So hone in on the channels in which are driving engagement. Hone in on those channels that say we can actually use, attribution modeling to say, these are where we're actually getting more revenue, is from these things. So these are the people that we're connecting. Who's unique? What's unique about those people? What's unique about these spaces that we go to, or these events that we're doing this in? And then continue to invest in those, because everything else is going to continue to change, right? And so you're trying to figure out what's sticking there. And that would be more of, I think, my approach in that.
Yeah, I think just like keeping it simple and making sure that they're at least stamping and tracking what each of these tests that they're doing and how it's converting. So like, just from the beginning days, that they're just trying to understand, like, well, what are some growth channels and growth tactics that are actually leading me to get new signups or new MQLs or new free trials, whatever that product conversion is. And it's like, oh, we're gonna test LinkedIn for the very first time. Like, well, yeah, how do I get them to at least understand, like, yeah, which UTM parameters to use, how to track both the asset content, because you also want to track like attribution by the actual asset that influenced it, because you want to know, like, well, did this webinar or this piece of content do better? But also the channel, is it LinkedIn or was it search or was it referral? So like having them break things out between sources and actual like assets conversions, and then like I said, the campaign tracking is really helpful for them to get started on that, and like have a naming convention and even like the source conventions of just getting that all started early, because like you said, as it grows, it's just going to get more and more complicated. But yeah, I found that concept has been really helpful for them, and then just working with salespeople to understand the importance of like actually adding people to sales, adding the actual person on the opportunity.
Having someone there in your CRM is valuable.
The contact roles. Sometimes so many companies have just been creating opportunities with just at the account level. So, like looking at tools for me to see that are like really lightweight tools to help that. I think you and I have talked to Alignly is another small company that's coming out with some really easy tools. So I'm really curious to test that out, because I think it helps with that contact role challenge. And then also, if you're using campaigns, it can roll that up and show you attribution. So
yeah, you want to go a little bit deeper into what they're doing there?
Well, I've only I'll be honest, I haven't used them yet, but what I have done is seen the products, and what I believe is really helpful is one, you want to measure all your touch points in the journey, and the touch points would be from the very first moment that you can track that somebody knew about you or took an action on your website or received an email, to the moment that they actually created an opportunity, and then maybe that opportunity is open for a couple of months, and then the moment that the opportunity is won. So in that entire time frame, you want to track all the touch points of the actual people that were associated with that deal, and then maybe everybody that's at the company level that also engaged. And so like you can kind of look at that window of influence. So I only want to look at people that were actually named on this opportunity, or do I want to look at everybody at this company? And I think Linely makes it really easy to roll all that information up and automatically find people that that were engaged in that time period at the company. Because otherwise it's a pretty manual process for salespeople to add people, and think about how many times you have one person that fills out a form and then they bring in 5 other people on the call or or the email out. It's like this information gets pretty messy, and it's like hard to enforce that it's always tracked.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I'm really excited about what Alignly is doing and Andrew over there, what he's building out. Especially for those early stage organizations, Series A, Series B, Series C, and what he's able to offer there. Because I think what he gets is that at that level, and at any level, but at that level, sales is like, it's such an exciting time to be a small company because there's a lot of growth usually, but sales is just running it, right? And so having tools that can help them and support them and monitor that, but then also be able to measure that and bring it back to a holistic approach of what marketing's doing and what sales is doing is the ideal play for any early stage startup there. So it's really
cool. I always look for tools that make it easier for salespeople too, because like the last thing you want to do in MOPS, as you know, is like tell salespeople to do like 10 new steps that they have to fill out. Like if anything can be automated, like I'm all for it. Same thing with like nurtures, for example. Like a very common scenario is like you'll reach out, maybe there's no response. Then it sits in pursuing status for like 5, 6, 10 weeks. You're like, are you still pursuing this person? No, they never responded weeks ago. Oh, could you flip it to nurture? Oh, yeah, sure. Like there's so many, like now with outreach and like with all these sequences, it's like you can automatically flip these statuses and keep sales like focused on actually what they need to do.
I kind of poke fun at it, but I mean, I wish I thought of outreach or a sales loft, because it's literally just everything that sales needs to do just automates it, and it's like who wouldn't want that? I mean, it's one of those concepts when in hindsight you're like, this is a brilliant idea. Why didn't I feel like so many people thought of this?
Don't worry. You'll think of the next one.
I'll get the next big idea, hopefully. All right. So thinking of the next big thing, what the future holds. Now you're working with these smaller organizations. What are you seeing in the future to be, or the future to hold for marketing attribution? And maybe not with, maybe it's different organizations, or maybe when you were at Atlassian and what they were doing. Like what's the future hold there?
Well, I think something I've been thinking about as I've been repeating this process over and over again. I've worked with 18 companies so far, and it's just, I don't understand why with all of these tech, like there's the marketing tech landscape, I think it just keeps growing and growing exponentially. There's must be at least 1,000 vendors now. But I think I'm always surprised by the level of effort it takes to set up all of like the plumbing and the piping and the touch points that we just talked about. Like, and it seems that there's only a certain group of people that know how to do it. Like these marketing ops professionals, but there's so much technology that's dependent on you setting it up correctly. So I'd love to see, I think, something in the future. Like, I know we've talked a little bit about like automated touch points, like I believe is Visible would do something like that.
It creates touch points off of website engagement and just has it there.
You just sort of plug it in and it will automatically capture that. But I would be curious to see if there's something that you can like plug in and it automatically creates these best practices for you. Because like even HubSpot and Marketo and Salesforce, like just stuff that I think I've been doing every time with, again, the last 18 companies, like why, I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands of companies out there that have to set it up or should be setting up in this best practices way. Like, why is this not automated or simpler? And I think that attribution models are best used and are only reliable on like the actual data that they have. And I think that's where you start to lose trust in attribution models, is when it's based off of like messy data or stuff gets in there that you didn't really want it to actually weight or something like that. So I don't know. I feel like there's something in the future of like, I don't know, I'm picturing like a one click, like out of the box, just like sets up.
Yeah, I
your
love that
data
idea where you
structure, 'cause-
go in and you say, especially as a startup, you can go in, you buy you buy a CRM like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, and you give it a few prompts of like, these are the things in which my business is doing, right? This is how big my workforce is, this and that, and then those workflows are already in place to say, okay, this is
yeah,
what our best practices are for you. This is how we would capture this data, and yeah, I mean that would make a lot of sense, right? Because the last thing you want as someone who's starting their own business is to like have to think through all like, how do I build this workflow? How do I do this and this and this? And it's like, I can tell it can roll it out, build it for me, and then I can adjust it and manipulate the machine or the software however I need to get to where I want it to be. But it can move me a step closer without having to build all these different workflows.
exactly. Like a simple prompt of like, even just like clarifying life cycle stages and like, what kind of content categories are you going to promote? Like, oh, I need webinars, I need events, I need,
Yeah.
what kind of like onboarding, like what kind of conversions do you need to know? Oh, I have a free trial and a sign up, and then or I only have an enterprise, pipeline deal.
Yeah.
Everything's, has to go through sales. Like, yeah, like a simple prompt that's like, all right, cool. And then it just like sets up those categories, like automates your life cycles, like creates like the overall like Salesforce campaign structure,
Yeah.
recommends like UTMs. That would be a cool product.
Yeah. I'm all for that. And then that would be an easy progression to have built in machine learning models on that, because then you like what's already built is built on best practice. And so whatever the
Yeah.
system that has that can say, well, our MLM is going to run against that now, and we could give you enhancements of like, this is how this works best, or maybe, and then they could take the learnings from that and say, oh, this isn't probably the best practice. We're gonna adjust this because we have all this data. We have all of our customers' data to say these practices aren't actually what's best. We're gonna adjust that based upon what the learning model has shown us. And so yeah, I can definitely, I mean, I love that. I think HubSpot would probably be on that before anyone, to be honest. I think, they're kind of ahead of the curve in a lot of things that they do. I really like some of the things they're rolling out, even with ChatGPT and the stuff they've come up with. It's pretty awesome. All right, so one thing I like to do to close out attribution time is to ask a pop question. Eric does not know this question. And so Eric is a big surfer, as far as I know, from what I recall from our times at working at Atlassian together. So what's the best surf you've had ever in your life? Like, where was the location? What was the biggest and best surf?
Oh man. Well, I've been surfing since I was 12, and
So a lot of surfing.
a lot of waves in my lifetime. I think sometimes the best surfs are not necessarily the best waves, but oftentimes like the best time you had, or the friends you've had and things like that.
Yeah.
And just that whole experience. I don't know. One that stands out really recently was I flew to Rhode Island for my cousin's wedding. And she was getting married, and she's actually marrying a surfer.
Oh, wow.
And we happened to time, and they were getting married on the beach, and so we happened to get there right as like one of the best swells of the year was hitting Rhode Island from Hurricane Lee.
Oh,
And
wow.
so really good timing for me. And so me and the groom, he had a bunch of boards, and we think we surfed the day before the wedding, we surfed the day of the wedding. The wedding was fantastic, obviously that was a priority, but like it was amazing. It was like warm water, it was just
Yeah.
gorgeous out, and just like I was there with all my family and friends, and
Yeah.
it was like just really 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 lucky and unplanned, but really fun. So that was really memorable.
That's a great story. I
um
love it.
but yeah, up here I'm up in shout out to Crescent City. That's where I am right now. Not a ton of small town, so not a lot of surfers, but there's a small surfing community, and so it's been really nice. But yeah, pretty cold water.
As I say, it's probably
Lonely
pretty cold there.
surfing. Yeah, cold. Yeah, you're often surfing by yourself, but it's there's definitely a lot of good waves up here as well.
I love it, Eric. All right, so Eric MacColl of Eric MacColl Consulting is his org. I'll throw the link in the description below. But Eric, thanks so much for being on, man. It's a really solid conversation.
Yeah, great to chat, and thanks for having me on.